Yeah. So yeah, it won a shitload of Oscars
Yeah.
in 19, I think it came out, and pretty deservingly so. Movie beats a lot of ass. Uh, and I think I saw it after it won already because I'm pretty sure they put it back in theaters or something. So I went to see it with Vince, and I was like, yeah, I thought that was really fucking good. I mean, the third act is it gets kind of goofy, but like, there is so much suspense and like dark comedy in that movie. It's pretty good. Obviously, you have there's like the poor family and the rich family, and the poor family slowly invades the rich family by framing the rich family's workers, and they get them fired, and then they're like, oh, I used to work with this person or whatever, and it's just like one of the family members. So they slowly creep into the house, uh, and the old caretaker finds out about it, and they start threatening each other, and then things happen. One of them dies, and then another one gets killed, or you think he gets killed, and then the other guy escapes. He kills the daughter, and then the dad kills the other dad, and he runs away, and then he ends up in the basement at the end of the movie. So,
Spoilers, by the way.
bro, if you haven't seen this movie,
Parasite.
fuck you. I don't care. You deserve to get spoiled. You should have seen it by now. Sorry. But yeah, it's
Dude,
just
people are gonna listen to this episode and they're gonna be like, "Oh man, they're talking about Parasite. I've been meaning to see that for a while." And all they're gonna hear is "fuck you" if you haven't seen it. Fucking idiots. What is this? The too bad we don't talk about spoilers podcast? Nuh-uh.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, dude. Like the scene that always stands out is when they're having a party and like the caretaker first shows up, and then they gotta like hide, and then the rich family comes back and they're hiding under the table, and they start banging and talking about how the guy smells, and I don't know, just the whole under the table thing and them sneaking out always really stood out. And there's a fucking really nice transition during the same scene when they go back home and everything's flooded, and like half the screen is like the water, and it fades into like the next scene. Oh, good as hell. Good as hell.
Yeah, I've noticed that you're a fan of good scene transitions in movies.
They are very nice, but
There is something innately.
I think
Innate,
Midsummer is always going to be the king of that. I'll be damned if I see a better transition than the fucking plane one. That was crazy.
that goes hard. I think you would really like. Do you know Zach King?
No.
So he's, for all intents and purposes, he's a magician, and he does a lot of video editing magic where it's, so to say there's a video of someone pulling up into a driveway, right? And there was one recently where it was a guy pulling up to a driveway, and he was stitching the video on the other side of the screen, and he was watching it, and he was like, oh, that's cool. And then the guy gets out of the car on the left side, and Zach takes his hand and he moves it physically to the other video, picks up the car, and then brings it back into his own video, and it's like a little toy car. That's kind of what like good film transitions remind me of. Is just like, it's magic. It's like sleight of hand. It's like if you're not paying attention close enough, you can't tell that the scene's changed. It's very cool. It's a very cool technical aspect of filmmaking that also incorporates. It's very creative. Like, scene transitions can be very, very creative, and I think that's where the art of film editing becomes art. Because you could argue that like simply cutting stuff together so that, like, what we do for the podcast, like when I make the clips, or if you were to say cut out an embarrassing line that I said earlier that I'm not going to mention again because you don't need to hear that. When you do that sort of editing, it can be easy to not see the art in that, even though it technically absolutely is considered art. It's an art form. But then when you see a good film transition, it's like, whoa, Like that, it adds to the movie. You know, it doesn't just serve the movie on a technical level, but it adds to the overall enjoyment of it. You know.
Yeah.
So, I can't blame you for loving scene transitions. But yeah, that was a pretty damn good synopsis, if I'd say so myself.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's pretty much the whole movie. So obviously there's a lot of social commentary, right, about how we, like, lower class and upper class people can both be seen by the other party as parasites in one way, you know, like, not to say that either party is right or wrong, but just, you know, from an upper class standpoint, you look at, you know, folks who aren't as well off as you, and like you see it all the time in the news and things like that, where you see rich people who are out of touch, they criticize the lower class and they're like, they're just fucking they're just fucking milking off my teat. How fucking dare you? You wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for me. And it's like Mark Zuckerberg is saying it, and he's, you know, grilling in his backyard with his alien friends. And then from like the other point of view, you know, you look at from like a lower class standpoint, you look at rich people and like the upper class, and you think, God damn, dude, they're just milking the system. They found a loophole in the system, in the economic machine, and they're taking advantage of it, you know? So it's like both scenarios, again, aren't like necessarily right or wrong, but it's all about a perspective. And this movie does a really, really good job at showcasing two very different but weirdly similar perspectives. And in that same way, you know, like you said, the main father of the lower class family ends up in the basement, just like the caretakers who were benefiting from the rich family because they gave them jobs, you know, and let them live in their basement because they snuck in there and the rich family didn't know any better. You know, it feels very much like a movie that would have been written in like the 50s, like the 40s or 50s. Like filmmaking was like a lot more simple, and I feel like because, you know, you had to be a lot more crafty with special effects, it made more sense to film practically, and it didn't cost very much money to build like small sets or miniatures or whatever. So I think of a movie like Arsenic and Old Lace, which is it's a very chaotic movie that gets more and more chaotic as it continues. It's sort of like a snowball effect, and that's what Parasite reminds me of. It's very much like a it starts small and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and like the consequences get so, like you said, it was like the third act is quite bananas and a little goofy.
Yeah.
And it's definitely, going into the movie, I didn't know what to expect. Like, I knew that it won all these awards, but I didn't know why. No one had ever told me what the movie's about. I honestly thought it was going to be like a drama. I thought it was going to be like someone had a disease or whatever. But no, it's like it's a dark comedy. And like it's a dark comedy with a lot of poignant commentary. But it's also really entertaining to watch, you know? It's like the framing of some shots are really interesting on a technical level. It's a you episode. Why am I talking so much? I'm sorry, buddy.
So yeah, not that I've seen, like I said, many foreign films. Like off the top of my head, like I know I've seen Wreck, like Record. It was like a Spanish found footage movie.
Yeah.
I think it's called Eyes Without a Face or something like that. I think it's French. Yeah, I've seen a few, but like, yeah, Parasite is just really well done and like just so far beyond what I was expecting it to be.
Yeah, I mean, because for something that feels like a practical, like obviously, you know, there are effects in the movie as far as some of the murder scenes go, but no, I mean it feels very like humble. Like it feels like a very humble production. You know, it's like all they really needed was like an apartment, a big old mansion. All they really needed. Yeah. And you know, a set for the basement, but it's like, I don't know. There's definitely more to it than that, but when you look at this movie, it's edited so well, and like everyone does such a good job at convincing you that this is a real thing that could have happened in like a real story. It feels very grounded in realism. While you're watching it, I think the best sort of minimalistic productions feel that way. It's kind of like whenever you talk about someone who works behind the scenes, there's a saying that's like, if you do your job correctly, no one's ever going to know that you're doing your job, or something like that. It's like, if you can't tell that a lot went into the production of a movie, but it's still a great movie, that's because the production team was working their ass off to make it feel a certain way, and they achieved that in spades. I don't know if I'm using that phrase right, but
The
whatever.
Ace of Spades. Yeah, really good movie. See it. Even though I seriously hope you already did.
I also seriously hope you really did. Do you have any? So you said your favorite scene was the one under the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the whole
What did
scene
you think? Oh, continue.
No, yeah, just the whole scene where they're like hiding from both. Well, first the old caretaker, and then the family comes home, and they still have to hide. And yeah, it's really well done.
So with foreign films, it was kind of a. I'm glad that you added, because when we came up with this idea to watch and rank our favorite movies in any given genre of movies, I think that was your initial, like, you came up with all of the categories and stuff and all the genres. So with foreign film, I think it's so interesting because it's not a type of movie that I generally think to jump to, you know? Like, when I'm thinking about sitting down to watch a movie, my first thought isn't like, what language are we going to see the movie in, you know? Because, that's what makes it a foreign movie, is it's not in the language that you're used to. So, did you feel like watching Parasite, there were any... Did you notice any sort of differences between Parasite and, like, an American-made movie or American-made movies that you also really like? And was it the similarity or the difference between Parasite's production and like a Hollywood production that really stuck with you, or did you notice it at all?
Not really. It didn't really feel any different. I think that's why it's like so good.
Yeah. Well, and one of the major things, one of the other major things that makes a movie a foreign film is the fact that it's spoken in a completely different language. In this case, it's Korean. So one common thing that I always encounter in anime specifically is sometimes I'll wonder if a performance is dictated by the language itself. Like, sometimes I hear a scene in an anime and the voice actor is saying it a certain way, but I'm just processing the translation. So even if the delivery isn't funny necessarily, it's the lines that are chosen and translated that are funny to me. And I'll go online and I'll read dub versus sub arguments or whatever. And some people who understand both languages will say, like, it doesn't make sense when audiences prefer one to another in specific instances, because the actors on both sides are saying it the exact same way, but in the language that you understand less, it doesn't come across like that because it's not your first language, so you can't pick up on those linguistic like quirks, you know? So did you feel like there were any parts of, like, did you ever think about that, like whether the native language of all of the actors changed the performance somehow? Or were you just like reading the subtitles and processing it that way?
Yeah, pretty much just have to read the whole time. You know.
Yeah.
So sometimes I find it interesting because like what they say or like how many syllables they say doesn't match up at all with like how much we'd say. There's a line where they're like trying to get a password and they're like, "Oh, did you try a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9?" That was subtitled, but they only said like 5 syllables. So I was like, I wonder how they say what? Did they just say like 1 through 9 like in their language? I don't fucking know. But
Yeah.
yeah.
It's what I found, I know very little of two languages. I know very little Spanish and I know very little Japanese. And sometimes in a show that speaks, that uses either of those languages, I'll hear a word that I recognize, and it'll be said a couple of times throughout the show or movie that I'm watching. But in English, it's translated into 2 different words or 3 different words or whatever. Like in Japanese, you could say the word like the only word coming into my mind is baka, and I don't want to, because it's a meme. But like in English, we have dummy, idiot, dumbass, moron, imbecile, but in Japanese, it's like you only really have one direct translation of that. So it's up to the, I wonder if it's like an inflection or a tonal thing that separates different uses of that same word in the other language, and blah blah blah. That's I mean, like you said, it's what makes watching foreign films so interesting, is just seeing and hearing the linguistic differences and how it affects the translation and how we process it as English speakers. Yeah, no, I thought all the performances were great, and like I think that's the mark of a great performance, is even if the actor is speaking a different language, you can tell what they're feeling based on their acting, and there's a lot of different acting that you can utilize other than just your voice. So thanks for throwing international films, foreign films into the genre mix, because otherwise I probably would not have paid attention to a man called Ove. Because the second that I realized it was in Swedish, I was like, oh shit, if this is good, I could use this for the podcast. So good stuff. Yeah, like you said, go watch Parasite. Again, because I'm assuming you're only here because you've already seen it. Unfortunately, there are no timestamps in Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you're listening to this on. And so if you haven't seen Parasite, sorry.
Oopsie daisy.
I don't know what to tell you. Oopsie daisy. Yeah.